Did you know that 85% of the things we worry about never actually happen? Think about that for a second. It's astounding, isn't it? We spend so much of our time drenched in dread, anticipating events that, more often than not, remain figments of our imagination. Our worries, our fears, they're mostly unfounded, aren't they? They're ghosts, specters of our minds, haunting us with the prospect of what could go wrong. Let me share a personal story. A few years back, I was terrified of public speaking. Just the thought of standing in front of a crowd sent me into a frenzy. The fear was crippling, paralyzing even, but one day I decided to change my perspective. Instead of seeing public speaking as a terrifying ordeal, I began to view it as an opportunity to share my thoughts, my ideas, to inspire others. That shift in perspective, it didn't just alleviate my fear, it transformed my life. That's the power of perspective, folks. It's like flipping a switch in your mind, changing the way you see things. When we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. Our fears, our worries, they start to lose their grip. They start to fade into the background. Mindfulness, that's the key. It's about being present, being aware. It's about seeing things as they are, not as we fear they might be. It's about recognizing that our worries, our fears, they're often just shadows, and shadows can't hurt us. So let's start practicing mindfulness. Let's start implementing perspective shifts in our lives. Let's start seeing our fears for what they are, just illusions, figments of our imagination. Let's start living in the present, not in the future. Remember, your perspective can either be your prison or your passport, so choose wisely. Choose to see the world through a lens of opportunity, not fear. Choose to let your perspective be your passport, not your prison. It's been said that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Truer words have seldom been spoken. Imagine, if you will, carrying a weighty sack on your shoulders. Each grudge, each resentment, each bit of bitterness you hold on to is a stone in that sack. The more you hold on to, the heavier the sack becomes. But who suffers? Not the person who wronged you, but you, the carrier of this burdensome sack. Now, let me share a little tale that might shed some light on this. Once upon a time, I had a friend. We were thick as thieves, inseparable. But as it often happens in life, there was a falling out, a betrayal that left me embittered and angry. I carried that anger around for years like a stone in my sack, weighing me down. One day, I realized that my friend, the cause of my anger, was out there, living his life unaffected by the weight I was carrying. It was a sobering thought. I was the one drinking the poison, expecting him to suffer. But in reality, I was the only one suffering. That was the day I decided to let go, to drop that stone from my sack. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I did. I deserved to be free from that weight, from that poison. And do you know what happened? The moment I let go, I felt lighter, freer. I felt at peace. And that's the power of forgiveness, my friends. It's not about the other person. It's not about righting their wrongs. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of your anger, from the poison of your resentment. It's about reclaiming your peace, your freedom, your power. So I encourage you to look into your own sack. Are there stones you've been carrying around for far too long? If so, consider this. Forgiveness doesn't make them right, it makes you free. Did you know that the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship you have? Just like a musical instrument, if the primary chord is out of tune, every note that follows will also be discordant. The same principle applies to our relationships. If the one we have with ourselves is laden with self-doubt, self-criticism, and negativity, it's likely that these elements will seep into our interactions with others. Consider the story of a man named Tom. Tom was a hard worker, constantly striving for perfection in everything he did. He was critical of himself to the point of exhaustion. This self-criticism didn't just affect how he viewed himself, but also how he interacted with others. He was constantly expecting the same unrealistic perfection from his friends, family, and colleagues. This led to strained relationships and a cycle of disappointment. However, everything changed when Tom began to practice self-love. He started by acknowledging his achievements, no matter how small they seemed. He began to focus on his strengths instead of obsessing over his weaknesses. He started to forgive himself for his mistakes, seeing them as opportunities for growth rather than failures. This shift in perspective didn't just improve his relationship with himself, but also transformed his relationships with others. He became more understanding, patient, and kind. His relationships thrived as a result. This is the power of self-love. By treating ourselves with kindness, patience, and understanding, we set a precedent for how we treat others. By taking care of our own mental and emotional health, we become better equipped to support those around us. The importance of self-love extends far beyond our own well-being. It's a ripple effect that can positively impact every relationship in our lives. So take the time to practice self-love, celebrate your achievements, forgive your mistakes, and focus on your strengths. Treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer to a loved one. Not only will this improve your relationship with yourself, but it will also set a positive tone for your interactions with others. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. Thomas Edison once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This quote encapsulates the essence of failure as a stepping stone to success. Let's delve into this concept a little deeper. Imagine you're an artist, and your canvas is littered with multiple failed sketches. Every stroke that didn't quite capture your vision, every shade that seemed out of place, they all felt like failures. But were they really? Each misguided stroke, each misplaced shade, they were all lessons. They taught you what didn't work, helping you inch closer to what would. Let's take this a step further and weave in a personal tale. When I was learning to play the guitar, my fingers would fumble over the strings and my chords sounded more like a cacophony than a melody. I felt like a failure. But did I stop? No. I kept at it. Every missed note, every offbeat rhythm, they were my teachers. They guided me towards the right chords, the right rhythm, and eventually I was able to strum the strings to produce music that was pleasing to the ears. The road to success is paved with bumps of failure. It's about getting back up every time you fall, dusting off the dirt, and marching ahead with renewed determination. It's about learning from your mistakes and using them as stepping stones to reach your destination. So the next time you stumble, remember, it's not a setback, but a setup for a comeback. Each failure is a lesson in disguise, teaching you what not to do, leading you closer to what you should. Instead of shying away from failure, embrace it. Welcome it with open arms. Let it be your guide, your mentor. Because in the grand scheme of things, failure isn't a full stop, it's just a comma, a slight pause before you continue your journey towards success. And as we wrap up this segment, let's not forget the wise words of Arianna Huffington. We need to accept that we won't always make the right decisions, that we'll screw up royally sometimes, understanding that failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of success. Remember, failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of success. Did you know that people who practice gratitude are 25% happier? It's an astounding statistic, isn't it? Let's delve into this a bit more, shall we? Imagine walking through life with a constant rain cloud overhead, soaking you with gloom. That was me a few years ago. Life was a perpetual cycle of dissatisfaction, always wanting more and never appreciating what I already had. Then I stumbled upon this concept, the power of gratitude. Suddenly the rain cloud started to dissipate. I began to appreciate the little things. The morning sun, a warm cup of coffee, a friend's laughter. I started jotting down 3 things I was grateful for each day. Doesn't sound like much, does it? But in this simplicity, I found a profound shift. I was focusing on the positive, and this focus started to alter my overall perception. My daily list of 3 soon became 5, then 10. I was on a roll. I began to realize that even on the worst days, there were things to be thankful for. The rain cloud, it had vanished. In its place was a radiant sunbeam, casting warmth and light onto my life. This is not to say that gratitude is a magic wand that will whisk away all your problems, but it can significantly improve your happiness and mental health by shifting your focus from what's going wrong to what's going right. Now this is where you come in. I invite you to start your own gratitude practice. Start small. Write down 1 thing you're grateful for today, then make it 2 tomorrow, then 3. You'll soon find that gratitude is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. Remember, it's not happiness that brings us gratitude. It's gratitude that brings us happiness. So, let's start flexing those gratitude muscles, shall we? Winston Churchill once said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." A profound sentiment, wouldn't you agree? This, my friends, is the heart of persistence. It's about standing tall in the face of adversity, about dusting yourself off after a fall, about never giving up, no matter the odds. It's not just about physical strength or intellectual prowess, but the indomitable will to keep going. Let me share with you a story about a young man who dreamed of becoming a renowned musician. He practiced every day, honing his skills, but every audition he attended, every gig he played, he faced rejection. He was told he wasn't good enough, that his music wouldn't appeal to the crowd, but did he give up? No, he persisted. He took those rejections, those criticisms, and used them as fuel to drive his passion. He worked harder, practiced longer, and pushed himself to his limits. His journey wasn't easy. It was filled with sleepless nights, self-doubt, and countless sacrifices. But he stayed the course. He remained resilient, and he persisted. Today, that young man is a Grammy award-winning artist. His music has touched millions of hearts worldwide. His story is a testament to the power of persistence. Now imagine if he had given up at the first sign of failure, at the first hint of rejection. The world would have missed out on a great talent. His music, his passion, his story would have remained unheard. This is why persistence is key. It's the bridge between a dream and its realization. So in your own lives, when you face a roadblock, when you stumble or fall, remember this story. Remember that failure is just a stepping stone to success. Embrace persistence. Let it be your guiding light, your beacon in the storm. Let it drive you towards your goals, towards your dreams. Remember, the difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack in will. So muster that will, hold it close, and let it fuel your journey towards success. Did you know that the average person spends 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're doing? It's a staggering thought, isn't it? Almost half of our time, lost in thoughts unrelated to our current actions. This is where the power of now comes into play, the importance of being present, of living in the moment. Let me share a personal story with you. A few years back, I found myself in a constant state of worry. I was either fretting over past mistakes or anxious about future uncertainties. I was stuck in a loop, never really living in the now. I was physically present, but mentally, I was elsewhere. It was only when I discovered mindfulness that things started to change. Mindfulness, if you're not familiar with the term, is the practice of being fully present and engaged in the here and now. It's about not overly reacting or becoming overwhelmed by what's happening around us. I began to practice it, starting with simple things like really tasting my food, feeling the warmth of the sun, or just focusing on my breathing. Slowly but surely, I noticed a shift. I was less stressed, more focused, and most importantly, happier. I was no longer a passive observer in my life, but an active participant. I was living in the moment, experiencing life as it happened, not as I feared it might be or regretted it had been. I encourage you to try it. Practice mindfulness in your own life. Start small. Maybe it's taking a moment to savor your morning coffee, really listen to a friend, or just observe the world around you. The key is to be present, to be in the now. Remember, the past is a place of reference, not a place of residence. The future is a place of expectation, not a place of exploration. Live in the present.